Then I will call this meeting to order. If we could all rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
to the
republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Fryrick?
Here.
Mr. Posnell?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Scalette?
Here.
Mrs. Schrader?
Here.
Mr. Sears?
Here.
Mr. Tillman?
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. 9 members present.
Thank you. A reminder to please silence or mute your computer unless you're speaking. And this is the first opportunity for public comment. Vince, do we have any comments? Okay, thank you. Everybody had time? Thank you. We have a link here for the approval of the minutes of the regular monthly meeting of October 19th, 2020. If there are no changes or corrections, I would argue that they be approved as submitted. And there is no board president report tonight, so I think Dr. Williams had a family emergency, so Dr. Krauser.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. Yes, Dr. Williams did have a family emergency, so I'm kind of filling in for him this evening. One item that's not on the top of the agenda is something that Dr. Williams did share with me, that the Pennsylvania Department of Education and the PA Department of Health did reach out to county superintendents in both Dauphin and York County this morning, arranged a telephone call to inform the superintendents that at the present time, both York and Dauphin County, totaling 26 total counties now, have moved to the substantial category in the scoring system that's done with the Department of Health as well as the Department of Education. And it's based on positivity rate per 100,000 cases, as well as percentage of positivity rates. So at this point, the Department of Education did not make any recommendations to the superintendents in Dauphin and York County, rather just inform them of that transition. That will be then monitored over the 14-day period, and at the end of next week, if it still maintains the substantial rating, the recommendation would be for school districts to assess their community spread and to investigate their current mode of learning. So at this point, Dr. Williams had mentioned that currently we're still in our hybrid model, and we would continue to stay course based with our review of our modes of learning based on time frame set early that's built on the turning of each marking period. So really today's call, as he shared with me, was more informational to indicate that the schools had moved to the substantial category in both counties. Again, totaling 26 total counties in state. Questions? Okay, the second item on the agenda is actually under the superintendent's report is mine, and that is an update to the comprehensive plan. So I'm going to actually share a screen here briefly. And just like to take a little journey down the process of the comprehensive plan. As I shared when we deployed the plan at its approval ratings in November of last year, prior to the state accepting it, when the board approved the plan, that we would provide triannual updates on the progress of our strategies, actions, and goals throughout the plan. And an opportunity both to provide some direct evidence of the actions that are unfolding throughout the district, as well as to celebrate the hard work and effort that continues to unfold with this plan. So this is the first update of the school year, and this is the first update of the plan as it's been accepted by the Department of Education. So as always, we want to revisit ourselves, taking a opportunity to see the vision and mission of the York Suburban School District. As a review, the work that was done by the steering committee for the comprehensive plan used our challenges, our strengths, and our opportunities, and melded that into 4 guiding principles or 4 overarching goals for the district, built on these pillars of student success, district well-being, which are both integral to that third goal, which is teaching, high quality teaching and learning. And lastly, of course, our roles and responsibilities with operational responsibilities and partnerships. So those 4 guiding goals were the basis for the plan in its entirety, and then we built strategic intent from there. So the first goal, student success, we focused on 2 strategies that kicked off for the first part of this update. Strategy number 2 and number 6, implementing common measures to assess student achievement and growth, and expanding opportunities for increased student agency. That second strategy, I'll say, was accelerated by COVID. It kind of springboarded us right into the process of evaluating and looking for those opportunities to increase student agency. And student agency is, again, that individual choice and voice in their process and pathways for learning. As you can see, that kicked off a series of 3 separate actions under those goals. One under strategy number 2, which was a process for reviewing our data points across the grade levels. And we began that at the elementary, so that's been initiated. And then the investigation of our virtual and hybrid learning experiences and flexible course schedules. Again, both really planned in the comprehensive plan, but springboarded at an accelerated rate because of COVID. So kind of looking at that evidence, we see on the left side, you see both our Trojan Online Pathways, which continues to be a process that we refine, tweak, and evolve. Even as recently this afternoon, Dr. Adams and I met with some family, with a top family, to receive feedback in an effort to continue to grow and refine that process. And then our hybrid model for learning, again, taking information and feedback from the teachers, the community, the staff, to continue to refine that process as we go. Long-term plan to continue to make that a viable options for students. Moving across the top right, you'll see our data sort, which we're using at the elementary level in the current structure. Student needs teams at the elementary level are using that as a measurement progress to record and analyze student data to get at an individual level. So that was one of the strategies and actions developed for the plan that's now been initiated and has begun a process with our reading and math specialists, and again, at a student needs team. Across the bottom, we see some of the introduction to our flexible scheduling, as well as our course offerings. The image that you see with this Monday, October 19th, that's a student snapshot of one of our students that's taking some additional online classes. They have a game design introduction course, as well as an astronomy course, both operating at the same time. And we're using what we've been calling this a la carte. BYU, Brigham Young University, is an example of their independent course offerings, where students can choose courses or pathways that may be in a virtual setting or beyond the course offerings that were offered in our top program. So that's goal number 1. Goal number 2, district well-being. As we've repeatedly said, this was a large part and loud and clear from both the students, staff, and community. We kicked off 2 strategies to start the last year. One of the strategies, in a sense, or actually both of these strategies, really began in the spring of last year. I think we've been kind of saying March 13th was a very important day in schooling, because that was, of course, the day that we saw the start of COVID and when the state began its shutdown process. But at that time, as a district, we were engaging in trauma-informed education, professional development. So 2 big strategies that were underway for us is our safe and supportive learning environments, as well as our enhancing our safety and security processes. And from there, you can see the actions that are underway. The 2 that are progressing are the 2 that I mentioned in spring of last year, and now are moving forward as we develop those plans. So evidence, as you can see, if we move across the top, We have our trauma-informed, healing-centered is a term we're using interchangeably. And every month, each one of our buildings is reviewing a series of videos, which all links back to our spring professional development training, which is linked to, at the far right-hand corner, Mr. Josh McNeil came and visited us and talked about the brain and our understanding of trauma, and that really kicked it off. So those two have been kind of guided side by side. The team of 20 is a focus group of counselors and members of each of the buildings represented and led by Mrs. Hassenfuss, where we're really analyzing trauma. We're strategically deciding how to intervene in buildings and providing strategies and support. Across the bottom, we have the wonderful Miranda King, our social worker, which I know you've seen numerous times, and her outreach and one of the strategies and actions linked into getting outward in our community to begin to change that narrative and break the stigma of mental health. And that was one of her publications that she did. COVID has kind of caused a little bit of delay in that, but she's working internally in the buildings throughout the course of this year to grow that. Across the center, you see our functional annexes, as I've shared in our safety plans. That was a big addition to the safety and security of the building, where those annexes are being discussed at a building level and very responsive to the needs of each building. Lastly, in the bottom, you'll see an ER plan. As I mentioned in the actions prior page, we talked about building student crisis response plans. This is a process that's initiated at the middle school first, so we can get a handle on that. This emotional regulation plan provides an individual plan for each student to identify their needs, their triggers, their calming items, so that teachers have access to that, so they can work with students as they're moving through a healing-centered approach or trauma-informed approach to their learning to meet the needs of those students inside the classroom. Goal 3, we have 2 strategies underway. Implementing the curriculum mapping model. That is, as I've kind of said at both standards and curriculum meetings, as well as our comprehensive plan, that's a very large process. It takes many years to unfold. So we're excited to see this process is underway. With that model, we're also meeting the diverse needs of our learners in inclusive classrooms. So you can see the actions that have been initiated in that process. It's certainly our high quality teaching and learning mapping team, as well as developing the staff professionally on an understanding by design framework. And lastly, developing those diverse needs inside the classroom. So some evidence you'll see here on the left side, you see Dr. Heidi Hayes-Jacobs. We are fortunate to work with Dr. Jacobs to launch the process last year, which kicked off our high quality teaching and learning team and began the process of training and understanding by design. EduPlanet is our curriculum software platform that allows us to operate a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And we use that framework, the Understanding by Design framework, to make a consistent and planning process. It's the backwards design, very familiar in education. Both that and Dr. Heidi Hayes-Jacobs are the counting ground foundational components of curriculum mapping. In the bottom, you see one of our Bold Moves clubs. This is that wonderful team at Yorkshire, and they've been hard at work through the start of last year, beginning to think about how we develop our curriculum in a contemporary and modern way. And they've been using the Bold Moves book from Heidi Hayes-Jacobs to continue to inspire that bold future in our students. So we thank that crew, and each one of the buildings are doing something similar to that. Goal number 4, we have 2 strategies underway. Strengthening the collaboration. As always, the integral relationship between our community and the school is essential to find success. And then, of course, with bringing Mr. Julian, we've continued that very fine eye on being fiscally responsible, and she's done some great things to align those priorities. So you see we've initiated a few actions under that plan and some evidence based on that. You'll see a couple items. Number 1, and I'm going to kind of kick with Mr. Chuli. She's done a great job to really audit the processes and workflows that are in place. And to do that, she's initiated some handbook materials that allow us to both kind of check and balance the way our workflow systems are working and investigate it. It's at an initiation level right now. She's starting to kind of lift the covers up underneath and see where we can develop greater efficiencies and effectiveness. From there, she also developed a very clear alignment towards the district goals and how they fit to the budget goals. So we can prioritize our expenditures to make sure that those align in a way that both is fiscally responsible, but aligns to the plan itself and where we want to move in a strategic direction. Across the top were 2 items that we responded to directly from our auditing. You saw on the last page, one of the processes was to audit our current communication practices. We did that in the spring of last year. And you'll notice that one of the data points we got back right away was that the preferred method for our local community was both email and texting. And you'll notice that we have implemented that process through the spring of last year and of course this year as a communication tool as parents have asked that. Another item that was done from that communication process and that audit was to see that families were looking for a little bit more in the way of a robust understanding of our annual report. So we did create an updated annual report as well as a catalog system where we can reference prior annual reports so that they can be archived and viewed. So those are the 4 goals, our current strategies that are underway and the implementation of said actions to continue to move process forward. It's a long process. If we continue to say it's an exciting one, we're continuing to make headway. The momentum's moving. And we've been blessed with some silver linings with COVID, that it's kind of springboarded some certain activities. And some of the collaboration ones, we've had to kind of think of some strategic and creative ways to get around that. So the last item I have for you, sorry, I had to slide backwards, is one item that I'm going to be sending to you that I'll have at our board meetings, and that is a business card. And you can see the front and back of that business card. That is an opportunity for you to always keep at the front of your decision making. We know that you're a valuable part in this governance process as you begin to make those important policy decisions for the district. So keeping the idea on our bold future and knowing what those 4 goals are and how they intertwine with the vision and mission of the district is a process for you. So I have these business cards for you. I will mail them to you. Not sure how long we'll be in a remote setting, but it's something you can put right beside your computer as we continue to engage in difficult conversations and move this plan forward. And I also have an example here when hopefully one day we return to an in-setting person situation, if that may return. Any questions?
Yeah, Dr. Krause, I've got one. Let me see how I want to ask this. One of the goals is common measures. It looks like, the state is going to drag its feet about standardized testing again. It's not clear what will happen there. What's their plan for assessing the impact of this year, the impact of hybrid learning, common sort of performance measures of the students across grade levels?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the reasons why the use of common measures was built into the plan. It allows for us to kind of reel in all of the, we'll say, nationally normed and benchmarked assessments that we've been administering and that have changed over the years to get a sense of what's being used and for what purposes. To the point of what we're doing to assess current progress at this point, we're number one, if the PSSA does not go, there's going to be a couple larger measures. We do use the CDT for the middle level grade. So that's one way in which we're going to measure growth and compare it to last year. However, not all classes implemented the CDT last year. So again, we're going to have a little bit of some areas that were implemented and some areas that were not. Another example, I know Dr. Ketterman and her elementary crew have been hard at work kind of organizing those assessments. And that's why you see the initiation began in particular at the elementary level, because we have the greatest use of, I'll say, nationally normed assessments with both the Acadians. Now, again, here's another transition. It used to be DIBELS. So some of these assessments have changed slightly, but still measure that same point. So what our hope is to get a sense on what assessments were used as benchmarking and diagnostic tools last year to align with what we're using for benchmarking and diagnostic tools this year in a comparative sense. So I'm not sure if that answered your question directly. The hope is
I guess the thing that I think I'm missing is that in light of not having standardized testing, we didn't have an opportunity to baseline all of the students when the semester started this year. So there's no easy way of looking at them to see where they are at mid-year or whatever. Is that
well? No, we did use assessments. And that's kind of what I mean. So at the elementary level, for example, and when Mrs. Tucker was using that particular spreadsheet that we built internally to monitor that, we're using assessments that were administered in a benchmark setting. So for example, and please, Dr. correct me if I'm wrong, but we're administering an Acadian test of all of the students to get a baseline score to see where they progress. I believe that's done again in the middle of the year and the end of the year. So I'm seeing some head nods. So those 3 assessments will allow us to progress monitor. The hurdle, as to your question, is how does that compare to last year and each individual cohort? I believe, and Grant, correct me if I'm wrong, that assessment has been newly normed, which was Dibbles, correct me if I'm wrong, and now is Acadience. So might have some slight variation, but the data itself should be normed appropriately, so we'll know where we were as we progress from last year to this year.
So at some point in the year, you will present before and after for us.
Correct, absolutely.
Because I guess what I worry about is the anecdotal. My child is not learning anything because of the hybrid model or the top model. I'd like to see some data about, how they're performing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, and really for that, we'll say in a benchmarking process, that's usually done in larger spans. So we did benchmark our students to start the year, and we did. I mean, to be transparent, we saw gaps, and a lot of that was from the spring of last year. So we started this year in comparison to students of the prior year of where they would have been. So we're seeing what we can make up in that point as we move forward. That's elementary. And then I'll say again, for the middle level, we're using CDTs and benchmarks. Now the high school, Dr. Ellis is fortunate enough to have still in place the PSATs, the SATs, and those things. So as those results begin to come out, we'll be able to evaluate them as such.
Okay, thanks. Now be quiet and let other people talk. Or not. Okay, I guess there were no more questions.
Okay. The second item that Dr. Williams had on this evening's agenda was relative to the motion for the retirement of policy 248, which was the unlawful harassment, and policy 348, which was another unlawful harassment, which is now covered in the new policy 103, discrimination, Title IX, sexual harassment affecting students, and policy 104, discrimination, Title IX, sexual harassment affecting staff because of this new form of discrimination.
Were there any questions or comments about this? I guess this will happen on the 16th.
Correct.
Yeah.
That would be a motion for the voting meeting on the 16th.
Okay.
In addition, we have, again, two great administrators joining us this evening, Dr. Stoltz and Dr. Adams. So I'm going to kick it off to Dr. Adams this evening and have him begin with the sharing.
Okay, good evening. The first thing, I know I've talked about Link Crew and some of the neat things that the Link Crew does, but that's my first update from the high school. We have a Principles of Leadership course, which is stemmed from just the volunteer service that those students provide to the school, but they're actually going through a leadership course this year. And recently had the good fortune of being invited to their presentations. And I know all of you would be really proud to see what these students are doing. So they charged them with coming up with ideas for the freshmen for activities. And they had it in a presentation style such that they stood up in front. We were at tables with name tags. So it was almost, it was very official and professional. And they had to present to us. And then we critiqued their presentations, good and bad. And then whichever group won, that's the idea the freshmen are going to have an opportunity to go through those events. So it was a real life thing. It wasn't just a fake presentation. So it was really neat. Now they're going to get to see the follow through. So I always like to thank you for your support of that program. And again, here's another opportunity where we're growing leaders in the high school through this, but it's not just the growth of the leaders. It's the benefits that all of our students, either the freshmen and or any of our new students, they're getting to experience. So again, thank you for the support of that program. The 4 teachers that run that program do an outstanding job. It's research time now. A lot of our freshmen are starting their first big research, and I'm looking at Carly on the screen, and as a junior, she'll remember this from 2 years ago. It's a career focus, so it's an outstanding project. And they're going to learn a lot about writing, and writing has certainly changed, and the tools that they have available to them as far as citations and researching and all the various aspects that go into that. But there's a lot of prep work that goes in. Teachers do a real nice job of trying to keep them on a tight timeline. They keep parents informed. I know because I have 2 of them this year. They'll keep parents informed of that timeline and keep them moving forward. But it's nice that it's the career focus. So they're putting in interest in an inventory, which is going to spit back out to them some potential careers they may be interested in. And then the students have an opportunity to narrow that down to one and actually do a lot of research in it. And the nice thing too is not just from the career focus that they'll get from this project. And I'm sure the parents on the board can attest to this. The students at York Suburban will learn a lot about writing over the next 4 years, to the point where when they go off to college, lots of the comments that we hear when students return to us is, wow, I didn't realize I was the writer that I was until I went to college, and then I became the tutor of the students on my floor. So great comments that we hear back. So again, that project for a lot of the freshmen is starting right now. So it's a neat time for them. And then I just have some exciting news. We have 2 new additions to the high school staff. When I say that, I don't mean to our family, I should say, at the high school. I'm not necessarily teaching positions, but we had 2 teachers that welcomed the births of their first children over this past month. So exciting time for us with Mrs. Mitchell and Mrs. Hallman both delivering their first daughters this past month. And then I also want to just extend, and Carly and I talked a little bit today, so we're making sure we don't share our reports. We're going to kind of hit what's going on and recognize the high school in a couple different ways. But in general, I just want to say thanks to all of you for supporting our extracurriculars this fall, and especially to the student athletes and the parents, coaches, and advisors of our fall sports and the marching band. Trojan Theater just had a wonderful production over the weekend. It's nice that even in a time of uncertainty and what's going on, I think through some strict guidelines and following and adhering to those, we've been able to provide some normalcy for these students in the extracurricular realm. So thank you to all of you for supporting them. And that concludes my report. Any questions?
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dr. Adams. And we also have Dr. Stoltz this evening.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen, hopefully. There we go. I wanted to share with you promoting literacy at Yorkshire. Last Tuesday evening, our families joined by Zoom in their pajamas and with their favorite stuffed animal, and we had an author read. So Jeremy Yerk, he's actually a middle school teacher in Huntington, Pennsylvania, who has authored several books. And he read to the students a Super Sammy book. Well, Super Sammy was about his own cat who gets in all kind of mischief when the family is away from the home. So we invited then our students to write their own stories of what their pets might be doing while they are away at school. And for the submissions, we're going to be pulling names out of a hat to get a signed copy of one of Mr. Yerk's books. So we had a really great turnout for that evening bedtime story hour. So we took advantage of it by having information shared by our reading specialists. We are now, us in East York, we are Title I schools. So with this captive audience, we took advantage of sharing what that means to be a Title I school. We introduced our reading specialists, the goals that we have for all of our students in terms of building their literacy skills, what type of services are invited to all students, our focus on the phonemic awareness and phonics instruction with our young students building their fluency, but truly most important is for them to love reading and writing as we do, as I do, as you do, as we do. So the parents were then shared with different resources. Parents now helping with this teaching collaboration with their children are often asking for ideas in helping with word work and independent reading, ideas for just helping reading aloud with their children. I talked to you about the importance of phonemic awareness and what does that mean and what are just some fun activities that they can be doing with their students. And I want to share with you the 20-minute reading challenge. This was something that we really wanted to hit home, and hopefully it was profound to the parents, because if they can only do one thing each evening, and we know parents are so busy, And that is to find 20 minutes each evening, each day, to read with their children. At our level, it's often reading with their child or side-by-side reading. Just the impact of what it means to read 20 minutes each evening. As you can see, the 20 minutes, you can compare student A to student B to student C, the number of words that the child encounters, and then the impact as the child goes through their schooling. And for that reason, we really promote to our children. We try to get a lot of books in our students' hands, and we're really trying to promote the idea of overall literacy. So we're looking forward to obtaining our Eagle Scout project of our little lending library, which will be outside the Mill Street doors. And then later in the month, we're going to be having our first Scholastic Book Fair. I know Ellen Fryrick always likes to attend our book fairs, but this is going to be our
Yay.
our first. Okay, Ellen, I'll hook you up. It's our virtual Scholastic Book Fair. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stoltz. So there's a small glimpse into the countless things that are occurring at both the elementary and the secondary level. And I think to your point, Mr. Pose, now that was mentioned about how we're monitoring that, I think Dr. Stoltz's example at the end about that compounding impact. So it's absolutely a priority for us to evaluate our progress on learning and mastery. And it's one of the reasons why it did into the comprehensive plan. And it's certainly something we're going to continue to monitor and keep you updated on as the year progresses. And that does conclude the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chichuli.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. The first item we have for you today is a recommendation from the Property and Finance Committee to authorize the business office to advertise and solicit proposals for the child care provider to provide before and after school and preschool programs.
Do I have a motion?
So moved. Ellen.
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes. The following items are just for discussion. There are no votes required. The first item is the administration recommends the board adopt a resolution to certify the tax rate for the 21-22 budget with no tax increase. I'm sorry, with a tax increase that does not exceed the index. So we will further discuss this at the Property and Finance Committee meeting, allowing the board members to have an opportunity to have dialogue. The second item is a recommendation to participate in the Lincoln Intermediate Unit Purchasing Consortium. This is an annual process and it's part of the budget development. The third item are two club student activity accounts. They're being recommended to be added from the high school, and that is the Technology Student Association and the Greenhouse Club. We've also attached the details to each of those clubs for your review. Along with adding the two additional clubs, we are asking to close two clubs, the Students Against Destructive Decisions and the Ski Club student activity accounts. The funds that are remaining in these two accounts will be transferred to the high school student council account. We've also attached any documentations associated or relative to the request to close those two accounts. Item 5 is a recommendation for the board to approve the MTI production contract with Music Theater International. And this is for the production Singing in the Rain to be performed on March 5th and 6th at the high school. The total cost is $2,135. Item 6 is a recommendation from the administration for the board to approve the master service agreement with Sourcewell Technology for the spring math software for 21-22. We currently use this program. Dr. Kettleman was able to negotiate the price renewal, saving the district $2 per student if we lock in the rate today. I'm sorry, on the 16th. And the last item is approval for the memorandum of understanding with Allegheny Intermediate Unit for the interpretation services. This is a contract that we currently hold. There is no increase over the current year. The annual fee is $120, but the actual cost is based on usage.
How much did we actually spend this year, last year? Some idea of what it costs us per year?
I will have to provide the board with that update at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments about the things that'll be voted on next week, on next meeting? Okay.
Item under informational section is the COVID expenses, and so I will share my screen. Okay, so the first page is just a review of how the budget has changed over time. So the column on the left is the approved budget as of July 17, 2020. And on the bottom of the approved budget were the estimates that we provided the board at that time. The column in the middle represented any changes. And so those changes occurred right before September 8th, and that was the addition of COVID relief funds of $16,844. Those funds are directly related to special education, and so we've set aside monies for the summer compensatory education. The last column shows another revision, and I've highlighted what that is. In the state revenues, you'll see that there was a decrease from the initial budget to the October 28th. And that decrease represents the component of the COVID money that was spent in 1920. And so the accounting must reflect when the funds were obligated. And so we spent $19,681 out of the PDE grant. And so we had to record that portion of the revenue into 1920. And so that gave us, we still have estimates here of the Trojan Learning Center, the 2 building-based substitutes that we estimated the need for. We also estimated some custodial staff and supplies, and then we added the special education COVID relief expenses as well. We did have some potential savings, or estimated some potential savings, that left us with a new estimated deficit of 1.9. Out of that, we will use the budgetary reserve of 500,000, leaving us with a use of fund balance of 1.4. I provided that breakdown. So the board, when approving the 2021 budget, agreed to set aside monies for the PSERS. So that is 300,000, and outside of the fund balance that we created in the 1920, 1.1 will be used to close that deficit. Any questions on the revisions? Okay, moving on to what we've actually spent to date. So when I provided this update in September, we had spent $648,000 in various areas. In that, we spent out of the PDE grant money. We also spent a good portion of the PCCD grant money. And then we have not spent any of the special education. And then with the cost beyond grants, we've also spent some money. And so the difference between October 28th and September 8th, when I provided this last update, is $21,890.92. And then I'll just pause there to see if there are any questions.
I guess no questions.
Hey, this is Joel, John.
Okay. Yeah.
In the cost beyond grants, Kathy, can you give us just a little bit of insight into what the custodial and instructional supplies are?
The majority of those are PPE supplies. And we had to buy some like humidifiers, small equipment to provide extra ventilation, but the majority are PPE supplies.
And is there any additional money that's earmarked from the state to cover those costs?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions?
Okay, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Bowen.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize that I haven't been available for the past 2 meetings as I've had field hockey games on both days. However, now that the majority of the fall sports have come to an end, I can proudly say that our health and safety plan was successful, as most, if not all, fall sports ended their seasons without having an entire team quarantine, unlike some other schools have. So on behalf of all the student athletes, we thank you for your hard work to ensure that we were able to play sports this fall. Aside from this, Minithon held a drive-in movie a few weeks ago, which was a very successful event, and is now starting our No Shave November fundraiser. Trojan Theater was able to produce the play Clue, Stay at Home, and stream it on Friday and Saturday of last week. From what I believe, this was successful as well. Also, since the first marking period is now over, top students wanting to transition to in-person learning were able to come to school for the first time last week on Tuesday and Thursday. With that being said, that concludes my report for today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And you have the committee meeting schedule linked. And Ms. Frierick, communications. You're muted, Ellen.
Sorry, thank you. You have before you the February 19th minutes that were approved at the meeting, and at our meeting in October. We went over a few things that have happened that you've been aware of about the annual report and the mailing that went out in the tax bill, and that there's a new section on our website for annual reports if anyone is interested. Mr. Staub shared with us the bold marketing plan that has come out as a result of, I believe, most of what was in the comprehensive plan. And so they're going to be working on that and various aspects of that marketing plan. And then he is also working on a brand guide so that when someone comes and says, I need a logo for this or that, there's some standard standardized examples for them to use. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Robinson. You're muted, Mr. Robinson. Okay.
It takes me a while to figure this newfangled stuff out. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Posnell. You have the minutes of August 19th are provided. Item 2, consent agenda. You have before you the personnel report, which includes resignation, employment, and extracurricular. Would any board member like any of these items considered separately, or are there any questions on any of these items? If not, the chair moves approval of the below mentioned items.
Would like item B2 to be separate.
B2,
Yes,
okay.
under employment.
Okay, then we have to revise the motion, do we not?
Yes, we do.
Okay. In that case, I'll withdraw the previous motion. And how do you rephrase this?
You would like to have the following information from 2 and A and B done with the exception of item 2 of B.
Consider that my motion, just as Mr. Posnell articulated it.
Second.
Okay, questions or comments?
I just wanted to say that I will be, as I have stated before, I will not be supporting filling the assistant business manager position at this time.
That's not part of this motion.
Okay, you just want to
let's wait.
discuss the motion. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Help you out there.
So questions or comments about the motion? Then I think this can be a unanimous roll call vote.
This will be considered a unanimous roll call vote unless I hear votes to the contrary. Hearing none, motion passes.
Now,
And
Mr.
now for
Robinson, we
item
can have
2,
it.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I said now we can have the motion for item 2.
Yeah, that's a motion I can make, is it not, Mr. Posnell?
Yes, it is.
Motion to recommend the employment of Nicole Fry, Assistant Business Manager, in accordance with Act 93 contract at a rate of $86,000 effective December 7th, 2020, pending receipt and acceptance of all required paperwork.
Second.
Thank you. Now, questions or
Now.
comments?
I just want to say that my vote against this is not against Nicole Fry. It is against the establishing of this position at this point in time, which I thought we should consider in next year's budget.
Okay, other questions or comments? Then let's have a roll call vote on this, please.
Yes. Mr. Sullivan,
Yes.
Mr. Tillman,
Yes.
Mr. Sears,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mrs. Fryrick,
No.
Mr. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Posnell,
Yes.
Mr. Scalette,
Yes.
Mrs. Schrader,
Yes.
8-1.
Okay, thank you. Is that everything for your report? Mr.
One other item, at the last board meeting, we mentioned there'll be a nominations committee meeting. That will take place at our first board meeting in December, which I'm not mistaken is December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day, whatever that means. So saying that, that concludes my report.
Will you have your meeting prior to the board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'm confused. The nominating committee is meeting when?
Prior to the board meeting in December. That's the way we did it last year.
Okay, just like at 6:30 for a 7 o'clock
Yeah.
meeting.
Right. We could probably even do it at 6:45.
Understood
that
now.
quick.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sears, Property and Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. Attached or linked actually in tonight's agenda are the minutes to the September 9th meeting. And Property and Finance met on October 22nd at 4 o'clock. Property issues were the new intercom and clock system needed because current systems in all but Yorkshire and Valley View are inoperable most days. Parts are not available. And we discovered there is a significant variation in costs and recurring fees. So as the RFPs are processed, we'll have further information on that. Mr. Gerling gave us an update on the pool, and upon filling the pool, discovered that there was a failed 8-inch valve and leaking seals around the observation windows. His recommendation is to remove the windows and fill the voids. The cost for that is about $8,000, takes 4 weeks, and it should start the first week of December. Ms. Chichuli brought us up to date on her proposed business office reconfiguration, which is being done to make room for one more staff member and essentially consolidated everybody in the business office in that area. That cost will be approximately $20,000. It'll come from the capital budget. On the finance side of the committee, the first subject was Bright Horizons. We are ending a 5-year relationship because Bright Horizons is not able to support our learning mode. So our decision is to terminate that relationship, find another partner who can offer a similar service under the same profit sharing model. The RFP process will run from November through March, should be finished in time to support a summer program and a full start of the fall 2020 program. 2021, program. The current impact is 25 families, so it is not insignificant. 2021 budget development presentation started with an offer and I guess a promise to do a health insurance review in November, so that'll be on the agenda for the November meeting. The Act 1 opt-out will also be voted on in November. Salary and benefit projections in the budget development at this point are based on status quo staffing. The estimated cost is $43.4 million, and that represents a 6% increase over this year. The preliminary PSERS contribution rate is a staggering 34.95. So even after so-called pension reform, we're still hovering at 35% for PSERS contribution. Preliminary enrollment projections were lower than anticipated in the facility review, and they'll continue to be updated. Mr. Sanders asked for an update of COVID costs, which were presented earlier this evening by Ms. Chichuli. Meeting was adjourned at 5:11 p.m. Our next meeting is November 11th at 5. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Legislative update, Mr. Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Posnell. As you may imagine, things are pretty quiet up in Harrisburg right now due to the pending excitement of tomorrow. I anticipate after the dust settles, there'll be a renewed push, especially from PSBA, on the question of cyber charter reform, considering the dramatic increase in the number of students who are moving in that direction and the hundreds of millions of dollars it will cost public school districts throughout the state. So I'm sure there'll be more to report in the future on that matter. That concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Lincoln Intermediate Unit, Ms. Frary.
I have no report from the LIU or the LIU JOA. York Adams Academy, I'm pleased to report that our attendance is holding up rather well during these trying times. We have 8 students who are ready for graduation in December. We are looking at how we're going to handle graduation. It will depend on how things are going here in the county, how we do that. And York Suburban has 1 student who has qualified for the December graduation. And you also have in your packet or online the board briefs from our October 27th meeting. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. York Adams Tax Bureau, Ms. Chichuli.
No report.
Thank you. York County School of Technology, Ms. Schrader. You're muted, Lois Ann.
Okay, the School of Technology, things are moving right along at the School of Technology. Other than encouraging colleagues to read the mini board report that is included there, I have no report.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank everybody that has joined us tonight to sit through this. The link is there for the board meeting schedule, and this will be yet one more opportunity for public comment. Vince, do we have any additional comments?
Doing one final refresh here, and no, we do not have any additional public comments.
Okay, thank you. Well, before we adjourn, I would like to say that, as mentioned, tomorrow is election day. Please, if you have not already voted, go out and vote like the future of the republic depends on it. And let's have 100% participation. And unless there are other questions or comments, we can be adjourned.
John, can I just ask one question about all these comments that we've been getting from people? Is the administration addressing some of these or contacting these folks?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Are
They're collected. And
okay, good. Thank you.
they're just not done online as with their standard in-house meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
I had a question more on behalf of the swim team about the pool and just how is the team going to practice if the pool isn't going to be started to be worked on until the week of December?
Dr. Krause, you might be able to help me with that, but I believe that okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and Dr. Adams can chime in there. We have been working for alternatives, and I see Dr. Adams giving a nod, so I think there might be an update to that on our locations to provide for that team. Dr. Adams.
Yeah, I know Mr. Marshall has since August been working to try to solve this unfortunate problem, and Coach Geyer's in a lot. So, I can't report on exactly what the solution is at this point, but I can tell you that Mr. Marshall and Carly, you can stop in too, but I know this is a priority for Mr. Marshall and Coach Geyer and all of us to make sure that our swimmers are taken care of to the best of our ability.
And I think similarly to that is some of how we resolved a little bit of that in the spring when we needed a place to swim. So that's what Mr. Marshall's searching for. So that's the current plan underway.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Then I think we can be adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening.